I have made a lot of games using different frameworks, languages, and engines. But how did I learn all that? Well, today I'll teach you my techniques and show them in practice by learning the basics of Godot in a few hours. My tricks are so good that I was able to learn OpenGL and make a custom voxel engine in just a few weeks. But you can apply those techniques to learn anything. Satisfaction guaranteed or you get your money back. But since it's free, you won't get anything back. Anyway, let's get started. Step 1. Choose your tools. You have to pick an engine, a framework, or something that you can use. Making a game using no tools is almost impossible. For beginners, I would recommend Unity, but I've heard that Godot is also pretty easy to get into. You will of course need to install and set up all of the tools. You can find a video on YouTube to help you do that. In my case, I installed Godot. Of course, just like everyone else, I opened it and I had no idea how to do anything. So I looked around. Nouveau projet? Oui, baguette. And I was ready to get started with a new project. Step 2. Follow beginner tutorials. Go on YouTube and look for a beginner tutorial using the tools of your choice. Try to find a kind of recent one too. In my case, I just typed on YouTube, Godot 4 beginner tutorial. Ideally, the tutorial should show step by step how to make a small game and explain how everything works. And if you're a bit ADHD like me, you can put that on 2x, baby. Video go brrrr. Wait a minute, I didn't understand anything. I wonder why. At this point, you want to copy exactly what the person does and try to understand how the structure of a project is supposed to look like. Where does the code go? Where do the assets go? How do we create objects? How do we spawn those objects? How do we give behavior to those objects? How do we use the inputs of the player? Those are the kind of things that you're looking for right now. Don't worry if you don't understand everything, you just need to understand the main stuff for now. But sometimes, even if you think you followed a tutorial perfectly, you might not understand some parts that are kind of crucial, and you might also get some bugs or errors. So what do you do then? Well, here's an amazing trick that you can use, AI. You can use an AI like ChatGPT, Bing, or Find to help you find bugs and explain code. You can ask questions, send your code, say what problems you're having, and most of the time it can help. For example, at the start of the beginner tutorial I chose to follow for Godot, they create a player scene. I didn't understand why the player was a scene. A player is an object, not a scene. So I asked the AI and it explained to me why the player was a scene. I then asked a follow-up question to confirm my understanding and it confirmed it. Also, my animations and movement were not working correctly and it told me that I used just pressed instead of pressed. And it even told me a couple ways to recode the movement. So yeah, AIs are pretty nice. Anyway, a few hours later I had completed the tutorial and had this. This is not at all what I want to do, but I learned how to use scenes, nodes, colliders, and scripts, as well as a few other things. And that was exactly the goal. A lot of people seem to think that if they want to make, for example, an RPG, then they have to learn how to make an RPG. But before that, you need to learn how to use the tools you have. And this can be done with any beginner tutorials and even is better if you do it with multiple ones. Step 3. Modify. At this point, you want to try to modify a bit the games from the tutorials you followed. Try to make your character run faster, jump higher, try to make the enemy spawn faster, whatever you want. If you don't know how to do something, you can again ask the AI to explain the code from the tutorial and tell you what you need to change. Try not to abuse it though, the goal here is to get a deeper understanding of the projects. Try to use the AI as a teacher rather than as something that codes for you. If it's still too difficult for you, you can go back to step 2, or maybe even step 1 if you chose to learn something awful. I want to make games in assembly. Yeah, good luck, buddy. In this step, you want to modify until you feel like you understand at least 70% of how the tutorial game works. You need to understand it well enough that you could teach it back to someone else. Okay, so in Godot, a scene is like an object, yeah? And then the things you add under are like the things used by the object, right? And then the scripts, they go on a node, and then in it you can access other nodes. But just the nodes that... yeah, if that's you, try to follow and modify a few other tutorials before moving on. Step 4. Add. Now you can try adding new features to the tutorial projects. If it's a game with coins and a shop, try adding a new item. If there's no shop, try adding one. Ideally, you should add things similar to what is already in the game, so you can use what's already there as reference. For example, if the tutorial game has a power, try to make a new power. This will be your first independent step, but still kind of assisted so it doesn't feel too overwhelming. In my case, I went a bit crazy and decided to add a projectile that flies where you click and damages the enemy. I was able to reuse a lot of code from the tutorial, such as the sprites, the velocity, the damage, the collisions. But still, a lot of things I had to come up with on my own, like the rotation and the spawning. So how did I do that? Well, I didn't. I asked an AI again. But I made sure I understood what it said, and I didn't ask for everything, only the things that I didn't know how to do. It told me how to spawn an object, and it told me how to rotate it. So now those are 2 more things that I know how to do. I would recommend doing step 2 to 4 with at least 3 tutorials before moving on to step 5. Also make sure you understand properly how all of those tutorials work. Step 5. Bigger is not better. Now you can start going on your own and start your own projects. But make sure you stay small. Don't try to make an open world RPG yet, okay? Make a few small games like Flappy Bird, an endless runner, a platformer, a little FPS maybe. Try to reuse what you used in the previous tutorials to make your new games. For example, if in one of the tutorials you set up collisions, try to remember how you did it and repeat it for your new small game. Ideally, those little projects should only take you a few hours each. Don't focus too much on the appearance or details either. It's okay if it looks weird or even if it's a little broken for now. The goal is for you to get comfortable making things by yourself and reinforcing the skills you learned so far. In my case, I made a little Flappy Bird game pretty easily. I reused the collision, animation, movement, and world setup from the tutorial by repeating the same steps, but now for my game, and I also used the same thing I used to spawn projectiles in the part that I added to spawn the poles. So I barely had to come up with anything on my own, but I still made a kind of nice game. If I was serious about learning Godot, I'd probably make an endless runner and platformer next, like I did to learn Unity and Unreal. But I'm actually learning Godot mainly for this video, so I'm not gonna do that. Once you feel comfortable doing most things, you can move to the final step. Step 6. Bigger is okay too. Now you can try to go a bit bigger with your projects and focus more on details. Once you're able to make medium-sized projects by yourself, I would say you have learned most of what's needed. When you think about it, the main difference between a big game and a small game is the amount of things, not really the complexity. The collisions used in a big open world game is not much different from what's used in beginner tutorials. What you are missing, you can learn while doing it. You don't have to learn everything before starting. So you should be good enough to start working on your actual game ideas even if you don't know 100% of it. Now you just need to practice and take the time to actually make a big project. Or as we all do, make half of a project, then start a new one, spend months on it, then start a new one, and never finish any of them. Welcome to the Game Dev Club!